Hello, this is Kirsten McDade from Resources, and in this video I am going to ask Brian Gouran, the Director of Environmental and Planning Services at the Port of Bellingham, about the cleanup work that has already been performed at this site and what we may expect to see in the future. But before we begin, Brian, can you tell us a little bit about your role with the Port of Bellingham and how that relates to this cleanup site?
Yeah, thanks, Kirsten. My main role is to manage the implementation of the cleanup project on behalf of the port as the property owner. So I work really closely with our port team to ensure that our organizational goals are considered as we work with ecology and all of our other project partners on the cleanup decisions. There's a lot of moving parts on these types of projects, including land use goals, port operations, project budgets, community interests, and then, of course, the regulatory requirements. So my role is to manage the coordination of all these different issues while implementing the cleanup actions with ecology.
So when the initial investigation at Georgia Pacific was conducted to determine the types and extent of contamination, the entire 74 acres of land was evaluated. However, the remedial investigation determined that it would be best to divide the cleanup site into two separate areas. Can you explain how the site was divided into two areas and what the rationale for doing that was?
Yeah, so following the completion of the site-wide remedial investigation, the port and ecology agreed to divide the site into two separate what we called remedial action units. And this was done for a few reasons, primarily allowing cleanup to happen faster because these projects do take a long time. So first, it was facilitated the completion of two early interim actions, as well as advanced some portions of the site that were relatively straightforward from a design and construction perspective. So, and then in addition to that, there were areas of the site that the port and city were preparing for the first phases of roads, parks, infrastructure that we wanted to support by completing cleanup ahead of those projects. If we had waited to keep the site and kept the site as a single unit, we still may not have the public access like Waypoint Park Beach or the pump track that have been really great public amenities.
And we are certainly thankful for those. From what Eleanor told us about the MACA process in video 2, the actual cleanup of the site generally comes after the feasibility study, draft cleanup action plan, and the engineering design plans. But in this case, some cleanup has already occurred. But before we dive into those actual cleanup efforts, would you mind telling us why it was necessary to perform these earlier cleanups before the actual cleanup action plan was finalized for the Chlor-Alkali area?
Yeah, based on the information that we gathered in the remedial investigation, the port and ecology agreed that there were two areas that would benefit from early cleanup work. First was an area where there were high concentrations of fuel oil in soil and groundwater that were very close proximity to the Whatcom Waterway shoreline. And although we hadn't seen any petroleum sheen or other evidence that the contamination was making it to the water, we agreed that it was a really good idea to move quickly and remove that as it was a potential source of contamination that would be much worse if it started impacting the marine environment. The other early cleanup area was based on an unexpected discovery during the remedial investigation where elemental mercury, the liquid silver metal, was found in the soil near the former Chlor-Alkali building. And because this material was likely the source of groundwater contamination in a larger area, rather than wait for the feasibility study to be completed, we all agreed that a focused removal of this material would be a really good way to address an ongoing source of contamination and jumpstart the cleanup activities in this area of the site.
And then even before the port acquired the land, Georgia Pacific Company apparently did some cleanup work on their own accord. What cleanup work did GP do?
Yeah, that's right. In the mid-1970s, GP completed an early cleanup at the site, which included excavating some contaminated sludge from a wastewater treatment basin and stabilizing that with a cement-like product and then capping it in a centralized portion of the site. This is an area that was referred to as the ChemFix area. And based on the RIFS work that we've been completed to date, this area really continues to perform as designed, and that cleanup is being integrated into the final cleanup action. Additionally, prior to the port taking over the site, GP conducted a number of focused cleanup activities as part of ongoing infrastructure projects, as well as completing remedial investigation activities, which help provide a significant amount of information and early data that we built upon for our site-wide RIFS.
Over the past 10 to 15 years, there has been quite a bit of demolition that has occurred on the whole site. Can you tell us what Chlor-Alkali area structures have already been removed, what will be removed, and what will remain on site?
Yeah, in 1999, before the port had any ownership or involvement on the property, Georgia Pacific closed the chlorine plant operations and began decommissioning that facility under an agreed order with the Department of Ecology. In that, GP removed all of the operational equipment, a bunch of above ground piping, conveyor belts, and a significant amount of other industrial type of equipment. Then in 2007, following the port's acquisition of the property, as part of our agreement with GP, they completed another round of decommissioning and demolition, which included the removal of a number of large above ground storage tanks, more piping, conveyor belts, industrial structures, and that sort of thing. In the Chlor-Alkali Remedial Action Unit, or RAU, the majority of the equipment and buildings have been removed to date, with the exception of some port warehouses at the Bellingham shipping terminal, which we continue to utilize and will remain.
Let's dive into the interim actions a little bit. We're now looking at a giant asphalt pad. The asphalt looks much newer than the surrounding areas. And from my understanding, this is the location of two separate but related interim actions, cleanups that were done to address mercury contamination. Could you describe what cleanup work was performed at and around this concrete pad?
Yeah, the interim action that was completed in this area was focused on addressing mercury contamination in soil and building materials from the former chlorine plant building. Some focused areas of mercury contamination were excavated from areas around the building. This was a really complex and surgical type of approach with a bunch of different excavation methods utilized, including vacuum excavation to eliminate mercury's tendency to flow into deeper areas as you completed excavation work. These materials were then mixed with sulfur and cement to bind the elemental mercury into a form that was stable and was able to be transported to a hazardous waste landfill in Oregon. Following the excavation activities, the chlorine plant building was then demolished and removed, as contaminated materials were actually part of the building due to mercury's tendency to produce vapors, which contaminated some of the building itself. A similar interim action was completed on a small volume of contaminated soil a year or so later, while we completed the feasibility study for the remainder of the site.
We're now going to take a small stroll over to another part of the GP property. This is on the other side of Laurel Street and is referred to as the Lignan Parcel. Lignin was a byproduct of the pulping industry, and it was used to make a variety of other products. The storage and processing of lignin also led to contamination. Can you tell us what work has occurred already on the Lignan parcel?
Yeah, and in addition to the RFS work that was completed to date, and in preparation for cleanup activities, the port demolished the former lignin warehouse. However, the building foundation and the other surface hazards like loading docks and those types of things have not yet been removed. So the port has also installed some security fencing for safety purposes.
The cleanup of the GP pulp and tissue area has been completed for several years, and development is well underway with Waypoint City Park, trails, restored granary building, and now the construction of condominiums. What do you anticipate will happen with the Chlor-Alkali area, including the Lignan parcel, when it is all fully cleaned up?
From a land use perspective, the majority of the Chlor-Alkali RAU is part of the log pond planning area within the waterfront district. This area is planned for light industrial manufacturing and supporting the shipping operations of the Bellingham shipping terminal. However, that will also include public access along the waterside, ranging from a future park to a small trail. The Lignan Parcel is located within the downtown waterfront planning area, which is different from the log pond. And that has more of a mixed use plan for businesses, restaurants, residential, offices, and larger park areas. Right now, the Port's currently working on a mixed use, affordable housing and commercial food campus with a local partner for the Lignan Parcel. More detailed plans are under development now, but the goal is to complete the Lignan Parcel cleanup and redevelopment as an early action in the coming year or so.
That is exciting to hear. So, Brian, out of curiosity, the Port purchased this property for $10 in 2005, with the condition that it would assume the majority of the cleanup costs. Did the Port anticipate such an elaborate and expensive cleanup, and how do you continue to make progress? Has the Port ever thought, oh my gosh, what did we get ourselves into?
Yeah, although there have been some surprises along the way, and of course there are times when you look at this and think, wow, this is really a complicated project. But by staying focused on the community vision for cleanup and redevelopment, public access to the water, providing a diverse range of jobs and opportunities, and then a strong, long-standing partnership with Ecology and the City of Bellingham and a bunch of other agencies, we really have been able to keep these really key and important projects moving forward.
Well, that is good to hear. And I want to thank you, Brian, for helping me and the community get a better understanding of the past cleanup efforts that have been done here at the GP Chlor-Alkali area, and to also let us know what we can expect to see in the future. This area will truly be transformed. We so appreciate your time and efforts on making this cleanup as successful and transparent as possible. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to add?
Well, yeah, thanks, Kirsten. I really do appreciate Resources' efforts to get this information on these projects out to the public and help translate what can be really complex and technical information. It's really been a great opportunity to work on this project, and a project of this magnitude that really will have a lasting positive impact on our community. And I'm really looking forward to see what's going to come next. So thanks for your time.
Again, thanks so much for joining us on this tour, Brian. Next up, Eleanor will talk with the Department of Ecology Site Manager, John Gunther. So be sure to tune in for more information in Stop 4.